Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order at 9 a.m., or 9:10 a.m. Roll call, please.
We got 20 present, 1 vacant.
20 present and 1 vacant. Adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Presentation overview of the proposed tentative county supervisor district plan. Let me start by saying the purpose of this hearing is to obtain public input on the tentative county supervisor district plan as proposed by the ad hoc redistricting committee to be acted upon later today by the county board of supervisors consistent with Wisconsin statutes. We will need to approve the following procedures. Number 1, all persons wishing to speak will be limited to 5 minutes. Number 2, a spokesperson representing a special interest group will be allowed 10 minutes for each presentation. Any unused time will not be afforded to succeeding speakers. Persons speaking in favor of the plan will speak first. Anyone speaking in opposition will be allocated the same time to provide their comments. A person wishing to add a comment to an original statement will be limited to 2 minutes. Time allocation and subject matter allowed is left to the sole discretion of the chairperson without recourse. Could I have a motion to approve the procedures?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. I will now turn it over for a presentation overview of the proposed tentative county supervisor district plan.
Sure, so the way we're gonna do this is, I guess twofold. So obviously this is the hearing portion, so just for the hearing, I'm just gonna show you what was proposed by the committee. Then we'll take the comments from the public on the proposed plan, and then we'll actually when we get to the county board agenda, there's actually the resolution adopting it. During that resolution, I will go into more detail in terms of how the plan was developed and everything for that purview. But again, for the hearing portion, the idea for right now is to get the information or input from the public on the tentative plan itself. So let me I have to do this in 2 phases. So it's going to pause for a second just for the computer to catch up with me. So again, we're going to go into detail of how the maps were created and everything at the county board thing. But for the purpose of the public hearing, just let me give background for the public. So the county board of supervisors is actually composed of 21 supervisory districts. The county board took action earlier this year to actually pass a resolution stating that they wish to remain at 21 supervisors. With that going forward, when you create the districts, there's some items that we're supposed to follow in terms of creating districts. In essence, the districts did change due to the change in our population. So the target district size is 1,432 people. When you create a district, you're supposed to follow some guidelines, and the guidelines that were used in this process is that the population should be within a deviation of 2%. For us, that means plus or minus 29 citizens per district. The overall district plan should be a deviation of under 5%. Our deviation's at 3.91. Actually, it's under 10%, I apologize. Our deviation's at 3.91%, meaning that we're meeting that requirement. Next items is that the districts should be contiguous, except there are some exceptions. Obviously, islands would be one of those. But in general, you're not supposed to create an artificial island when you create a district. The district should be compact. Again, the whole concept of no gerrymandering. And there are other considerations that can be taken into. You can account for existing supervisors and their location. And you also can consider, general representation. So given that, the committee did meet and they put together this plan that's, I guess, both in the county board packet and also on the screen. Again, it represents 21 supervisory districts. And again, I guess at that point, I'll leave it at that for input from the public. And again, we can go into more detail when we get to the resolution itself, but for the purpose of public comment, I think we have enough.
Okay. All right, I will now open the meeting. Or, I'm sorry, open the hearing.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop sharing the screen just so we can see individuals who might wanna speak. And I'm going to start actually in the Peninsula room first. So if there's someone in the Peninsula room that would like to speak, if you'd please come up to the podium and give your name and address. We have you unmuted and you have the floor.
Good morning. My name is Pat Szynski, 1218 Texas Street, Sturgeon Bay. I'm speaking today as the Chair of League of Women Voters of Door County in favor of the proposed redistricting maps. We commend the staff, the county staff, and the ad hoc redistricting committee for their work. The process of redistricting, even with the help of computer programming, is complicated and difficult with many moving pieces. With the required parameters of equalized population, compactness, and contiguity, one seemingly small change in a district line can skew and affect the entire map. The proposed map was drawn using those parameters and without consideration of where current supervisors live, which is the way it should be. Door County has grown and the population, for better or worse, has shifted. Fairness requires that the district maps reflect that. And I believe that these district maps do. We urge the full Board of Supervisors to support the proposed maps, which come closest to the fairest way to represent the county and the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the Peninsula room who'd like to speak on the redistricting? I'll ask one more time. Anyone in the Peninsula room who'd like to speak? Okay, I'm going to mute the Peninsula room, and now I will shift to those individuals who are online. Again, we're in the public hearing for the redistricting maps. Is there anyone who's online who would like to make a comment on the redistricting maps? Again, if you're online, you can raise your hand, or if you're calling in, you get *9. I will ask 3 times. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Is there anyone who'd like to speak? And for the final time, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the maps? With that, I will turn it back to the County Board Chair.
Okay. I will declare the hearing completed since there are no further public comments. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. We're now adjourned from the public hearing. I think it was- We're getting there.
You're most likely gonna have to log back in, because we're starting a new session. All right, we're good.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order at approximately 9:20 a.m. on September 21st. Roll call. Okay.
20 present.
Great. 20 present. I did skip something. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Presentation of the agenda. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Item number 5, Resolution 2021-63, appointment to fill a vacancy in Supervisory District 9, administration of oath of office by County Clerk Joe Lau. I would ask Susan to make the motion.
I move that we adopt resolution 2021 to fill vacancy in Supervisory District 9.
And we have a second? Okay. Is this by roll call? I'll do voice, okay. By voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Rodney, would you please join us up front?
In front of Biz.
Come up front of Biz. Keep coming.
You go that way. So they can see you. There you go. No, you only see me now, so.
Gotta
Okay.
stand in front of Biz.
So
Let's
come-
go that way. There you go.
Keep coming, keep coming.
A little bit
There we
more.
go.
There you go.
All
There we
right.
go.
Okay, raise your right hand, please. State after me. I, Rodney Beardsley,
I, Rodney Beardsley,
who have been appointed to the office of County Board Supervisor,
who have been appointed to the office of County Board Supervisor,
District 9,
District 9,
in and for the County of Door,
in and for the County of Door,
but have not yet entered upon duties thereof,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office
and faithfully discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Right there. We'll make you official.
Congratulations. And where's Rodney supposed to sit, Joe?
Rodney's gonna sit right over here.
We're not, he's not gonna use, I had his hard copy.
Okay, next we have correspondence. There is a letter and attachment with a photo from Robert Seegers, email in the attachment from 8/26. Next will be public comment. Ken?
Okay, we'll go to public comment, and again, we'll start in the Peninsula Room. I believe if Wayne is in there, I'll ask to unmute, if someone can unmute the computer. Okay, it's there. So again, if you'd like to come up to the podium, give your name and address, you have 3 minutes to address the county board.
All set? Yes, sir. My name is Dan Vandertyne. My address is 1144 County Road C, Brussels. I appreciate the chance to make public comment here. And the reason I'm here is on your agenda, on item 12, acceptance, approval of gift grant and or donation, water quality notice of discharge. You're asked today to okay receiving a grant from a DNR that would be used on my farm to replace manure structure and a heifer barn. I'd like to give you a little bit of background. Where I live in Brussels is we milk about 40 cows, my wife and I, and we have a young son that's planning on coming back to the farm. In 1991, we, Soil and Water designed a manure pit and we put it in at that time. In 1995, we found that manure pit to be leaking water in. We contacted Soil and Water in the state and they documented it. I want to fast forward to 2018. Lake Michigan levels were high. We were receiving a lot of rain. Normally, my pit, which is 1.2 million gallons of liquid, of manure that it will hold. Normally, we hold about 800,000 gallons out of my 40 cows. And in 18 and 19, I hauled out over 2 million gallons of manure. Knowing I had a problem with the water leaking in, I contacted Soil and Water in February and sat down with a meeting with them. In April of 2020, Soil and Water, the DNR, DADCAP, and NRCS all came to my farm to see the pit empty and documented the leaks of water running into my pit. They asked me if I could get a backhoe out there and we dig some test holes around the outside of the pit, in which we did. And we found out that I have over 20 feet of clay, very good clay.
You have
And it
30
wasn't
seconds
groundwater
left, sir.
coming up, but it was water, perch water coming in from the side. We started the process of looking what we're gonna do. They figured we had to replace the manure pit. Soil and Water was gonna write up some grants to the DNR. We asked to be part of the grant writing to make sure we could come up with the cost, the right cost. We'd get builders involved and construction people. Soil and Water did inventory of my farm. They also did not like my heifer calf barn being a dirt floor. So they wanted that replaced also. So the amount you were asked to receive today from the DNR is a large sum of money. But since right now, I do not believe that the costs that Soil and Water used are correct. They did not include anybody from my farm in helping find these costs and how much to apply for. So this is gonna end up leaving me pay a bigger amount. We will not even get clear to the 70% cost sharing that's required. It's gonna put a heavy burden on my farm. Also, the pit they designed and the one cost share for is half the size, 600,000 gallons. We're currently at 1.2 million gallons, which is gonna be an extra hardship for us. So with that, I'm looking for you to not accept the money from the DNR at this time, so I can sit down with Soil and Water and find the right cost and apply for the right amount, so my farm can continue on for the next generation. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the Peninsula room who'd like to speak? A second time, is there anyone else in the Peninsula room who'd like to speak? Okay, I'll go to those online. Again, if you're online and you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand, or you can, if you're dialed in, you can hit *9. But I do have one individual. Christine Reed, I have you unmuted. You can speak. You have 3 minutes.
Christine Reed, Sleepy Hollow Drive, Forestville. I have 2 items of concern regarding the Mill Pond drawdown. If I do not have sufficient time to discuss, I'm requesting, if the entire public comment isn't used, if I can speak again. First, vegetation in the flowage. Door County had a plan and schedule that was published before the vote. There's a very high level activity titled Mill Pond Refill Fall 2021. Under that broad category is an activity that is designated to soil and water. And I will read that activity. It states vegetation assessment by July 15 and identify preferred control method, parentheses, spray, mow, burn, or the ubiquitous do nothing, and close and end the timing. So we are requesting access to that vegetation assessment that was completed by July 15th. And the window of opportunity for some of these preferred control methods, since the refill started September 1st, I believe spray, mow, and burn probably are no longer an option. This was a stated goal by Erin Hansen the day of the vote, and I'll read her quotation: restore a more diverse and abundant native plant community. That, along with compaction of sediment, which is on the administrator's report, for some reason, the other goal, there were two goals, the compaction and the more abundant native plant were the two goals, but on the administrator's report, it just has compact sediment over a 2-year period. And the vegetation part of it seems to have just kind of dropped off the radar. However, the basin of the flowage became populated heavily with vegetation. It is 94 acres. I would say approximately 80 acres is occupied by significant vegetation, including narrowleaf cattail, which is an aggressive invasive.
You have 30 seconds.
Nothing has been done to control that. If nothing is done, which isn't really an activity, it is just, a bad option, that will die, decay, become submerged, litter the bottom of the mill pond, smother the bottom, and deplete oxygen, and actually cause the problems that you claimed were going to be solved. So we would like to see the assessment and know what the options are for removing vegetation. The other item that I had was regarding the refill, which started on September 1st. And then the valve was substantially closed, approximately 90% closed, to back water up into the mill pond to fill. However, a large snapping turtle got trapped in that opening and was battered. When I found it on September 12th, which was a Sunday, unfortunately, I called Wayne Spritka and left a message and immediately emailed him, County Parks, and the DNR, and then waited for someone to come and hopefully rescue that snapping turtle. Parks security came through at about 5:30 in the afternoon. I showed him the trapped animal, which had been in there all day, and he refused. He said he was not able to do anything about it. So it stayed there overnight. And the following morning, I went over, and Parks showed up at about 9 o'clock. Wayne had contacted me and said, we will come out to take a look. And they did at about 9 o'clock the following morning. And that they cracked the valve open sufficient for the very large, and these turtles live to be 70 to 120 years old if they're not tortured to death.
Christine, I've given you 5 minutes.
passed-
Could you make your point? You're at the 5-minute mark, so we allowed you to go longer, but do you have could you get to your
Okay,
point?
I'll get directly to the point. Wayne contacted me after because I wanted to know if that survived or not. And he said it appeared to be alive. They took it away in one of the trucks. And he said they were going to put it by pond by the maintenance building. I'm checking to see if it survived or not. I told Wayne when we communicated, if it survives, we want it back in the mill pond after the refill is complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I will ask for a second time. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, thank you.
Is there any supervisor's response? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the August 24th, 2021 regular meeting. Have a motion, a second. Any changes, additions, deletions, other comments, grammatical remarks, or errors that need to be corrected? Susan?
I have a question, a clarification on page 9, under the review of committee minutes. Supervisor Engelbert talked about the number of people. I may be totally crazy in terms of my memory, but I was wondering, I had in my head that it was 200, over 200,000, not over 20,000. Can Supervisor Engelbert clarify?
Royce.
Oh, Roy, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The quote from the treasurer of the Fair Board said it was over 20,000 paid admissions. 20,000 paid.
Sorry.
Anybody else? If not, by voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. County Administrator.
So the monthly report is actually in your packet for the operational and capital projects. We do have, if any questions, then I can answer that. If not, we'll jump down into the discussion on our COVID and operations. I do have Sue and Joe is in the back, but they're here to do a presentation. So let me just bring up the presentation so I can share that. I had Sue signed in before. Oh, 1 second. Oh, they are. I'm sorry, Sue. I lost you for a second. I'm going to move you into a panelist. Okay, Sue, I made you a panelist. You should have the floor. I have your presentation up on the screen. Let me double check, Sue. We're not hearing you. Do you have your...
There we go.
There you are.
Am
Thank
I-
you. Yep, now we have you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Next slide, please. So just to give us some context, across the country, things are surging related to the Delta variant. COVID continues across the country. You can see that we, along with most of the country, are at a high disease activity level. Next slide, please. So this is a graph of Door County cases by weekly total. The timeline across the bottom is weeks of the year. And then the red dots are number of cases in a 1 week period. Yellow is last year and red is this year. And what's interesting about this, unfortunately, is that at this time, the cases are surging and it looks similar to the surge later in the fall of last year. The line that plummets down is simply because that's the end of the timeline. It would be great if that really happened. But anyway, I just wanted to share this picture so you could get a better idea of how things are looking. We have 182 confirmed cases so far in September, and that is more than all of August. We've added 4 hospitalizations so far this month and 1 death. And currently there's 321 active cases. Door County Medical Center reports they are super busy in recent weeks, not necessarily with COVID, but in general, and they're having more challenges being able to transfer patients for specialized care to other hospitals across Northeast Wisconsin because they are also very busy. There are some cases in those fully vaccinated, which are called breakthrough cases. Across the state, the number of cases in unvaccinated account for, the number of cases in unvaccinated account for 4 times the number of cases in those that are fully vaccinated. And likewise, only a small fraction of hospitalizations and deaths are attributed to those fully vaccinated. If you'd like all the specific data, it's on the Wisconsin DHS illness after vaccination page. Next slide, please. So this is a graph of Door County cases by age group in the last month. When the data from last month showed no cases in the 0 to 9 age group, and 11% of the cases were in the 10 to 19 age group. So there has been a increase in cases in children. Schools are in session. Of course, they're having challenges related to COVID. Along with cases, there's all the parameters for isolation and quarantine. Washington Island School and Gibraltar have had universal masking requirements in place since the start of school, and neither of them have experienced any cases. I'd like to really thank our partners at DCMC, Dr. Fogarty, Dr. Hayes, Brian Stevens, and Ann Brettel, RN, school nurse coordinator, for attending several recent school board meetings to encourage mask requirements. And as of this week, Sevastopol, Sturgeon Bay, and Southern Door all have implemented mask requirements for either the elementary grades or universally. There have been COVID cases in those last 3 school districts. Not any particular outbreak situations, and most due to exposures outside of school, but there have been some traceable to school transmission. And we're very pleased about the mask requirements. It's going to decrease the number of cases and also the number of students that will need to quarantine. The CDC parameter for close contact decreases from being within 6 feet to being within 3 feet in school settings when there's layered prevention measures, including students universally masked. We continue to meet on a regular basis with school leaders, school nurses, and Dr. Fogarty to collaborate regarding prevention for schools as far as COVID. Next slide, please. Vaccination. So this is percent of Door County residents who have received at least 1 dose. And overall, we're ahead of the 56% of the state's population has received at least 1 dose. And here we're over 71%. You can also see that a full 16% of the state's population, those under 12, are not yet eligible for vaccine. Indications are that in coming weeks, there may be vaccine approval for those younger ages. And I'd also like to point out in the teen groups, the numbers, the percentages are inching up. So happy about that. Last Friday, the FDA's Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee recommended a booster dose for recipients of the Pfizer vaccine who are age 65 or older or are at high risk of severe COVID. So this recommendation is just a first step in the process. Before booster doses can begin, approval must be granted by the FDA and the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. That committee is expected to meet sometime this week. And while there's still steps to come, Door County Public Health is preparing and planning for booster dose vaccination clinics. As we wait to learn more, please be patient. There's ample vaccine supply, and so everyone who's going to be recommended for a booster dose will be able to receive one. We continue our COVID clinics, vaccine clinics on a regular basis here and in Sister Bay every 3 weeks. The next time in Sister Bay is this Thursday. We've done periodic visits to Washington Island. We were on the island twice in August to give COVID vaccine. And please refer to the COVID webpage for details on that. And then please watch for press releases and information on our webpage for our October seasonal flu vaccine clinics. Those will include COVID vaccine this year. They will again be drive-through, and we'll be doing those at several locations around the county. So I've given you all the facts and the data on the pandemic, but there's another aspect that at present is equally threatening to the health and well-being of our community. And I'm sure you're aware and can feel the high emotional charged regard for where we are in the pandemic, and in essence, the collective mental health of our community. Part of this is, I think, COVID fatigue or apathy. We all want to be done with this. Believe me, I want to be done with this. Unfortunately, relaxing some of these prevention measures only causes more cases. And some people have genuine concerns and questions, confusion about what's recommended. And so to be clear, currently we have a high level of disease activity. Masking in indoor public places, whether vaccinated or not, is recommended for everyone. Just because there are not mandates or requirements does not mean it's not important. Large indoor gatherings with groups of people unmasked who are not distanced create high risk. Distancing, hand washing is still recommended. Please stay home if you have symptoms and get tested. I can't tell you how many people have been sure that they just were having symptoms due to an allergy and tested positive for COVID. If you are a close contact of someone who is diagnosed with COVID, you need to quarantine unless you've been fully vaccinated. There seems to be a volatile spread of misinformation, and the divisiveness and politicization of things like vaccine requirements, isolation and quarantine have made recent weeks really some of the most challenging that we've had at Door County Public Health. We've become a vessel for a lot of the frustration, fear, and negativity around COVID. So I don't have a solution for what I've just described, but needed to call it out as it's serious. Civility and common courtesy is lacking, and it really affects the collaborative work we need to do to get through this. And that's all I had as far as an update.
Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to extend a huge kudos and thank you to Sue and her team for continuing to provide amazing service to our community, especially in the face of all of these other challenges that have been added to what should be just a health and science issue. So kudos to you and your team, and thank you.
I appreciate your support, Megan, and the support of the Health and Human Services Committee has been really, really nice.
Vinny?
Just also wanted to say thank you to Sue and the team and the Health and Human Services Department, and wanted to just say that this discussion doesn't really have place in a political body. It has place in a health field, and the clear message we've gotten from health officials in both public health and the Door County Hospital System is masking is a preventative way to help with COVID. So I just want to show support for that, and would hope as leaders in this county board and county administration, we could show the same support. As of yet, the people we are wearing masks for, if we are vaccinated, are the children who are under 12 who cannot be vaccinated. And for expecting parents, how many people come in contact with this building who interact regularly with children under 12. So I'm hoping as schools are getting more on board, and people are understanding that this is an important piece of the program, that we can do that as leaders as well. Thank you.
Kara?
Hi, thanks Sue so much. I just also wanted to say that from experience right now, I have been vaccinated and was in close contact with my son who tested positive, and now I'm just as sick, or we're like getting out of it right now, but we're just as sick as he was. So even if you've been vaccinated, guys, I see so many people who think that they can just, not wear masks and stuff, even, and you can still get COVID, and it's still really bad. It wasn't fun at all, and it's still not over. So I just want to, provide a cautionary tale to you guys to maybe mask. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Sue.
I just had
Thank you.
just one other item just to report in terms of just our operations. Obviously, we're monitoring our operations. Again, if you recall, last year, when we went through our operations, we put together continuity plans. In other words, what we were trying to do to make sure that we stay open in terms of provision of services. So we had those in place last year. If you recall, last year, we kind of went to a model where we operated 50-50. In other words, we had staff that are working 50% time here or 50% time at home. Obviously, we have those plans in place still. If we need to implement those, I guess we've been working with both Joe and HR and also Sue in terms of, do we need to go down that path yet? I think the main variant right now is obviously we have individuals have been vaccinated, and we're trying to react to, do we go down that path, or do we try to, eventually start to adapt in terms of how we do some of our operations internally. So I just want to let the county board know that we do have the continuity plans still in place. We have not implemented those. I guess we're monitoring our numbers, and we'll see where that goes. And if we need to, I guess, move forward, I guess what I'd do is I'd call David to get concurrence in terms of, I guess, moving forward with that, but we could implement that should we need it. Obviously, one of the things that we're trying to consider is obviously that, again, we're facing a spike, but again, it's SARS. So at some point in time, we need to also adjust to how to live with it and how to operate with it. So I think it's finding that balance, because it's not something that, at least from what they're saying, again, I'm trying to stay without the medical stuff, but it is something that, depending on what variant it is and how long this goes on, this is something I think we're gonna have to deal with long term. In other words, this part of how we operate. So we're trying to find that balance in terms of organization and how we do that. And I guess, again, we're monitoring those numbers, but if we do feel that there's a need, should the numbers or our situations change where we need to change our operations, we will do such accordingly. And again, I would confer that with David, and then also provide an update to the county board. But just to let you know that we do have those plans in place should we need those.
Vinny? Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I would say anything, because I feel like what I'm saying is gratuitous, but I lend my support as well to Sue and Joe and Ken and all of the staff that are dealing with this. The sad thing about this whole pandemic is that the people who are the most front line in it are the ones who have taken the most abuse from the public. And so to the degree that we as leaders can pour oil on the waters or help people realize that these are not easy situations and that they need to temper their expectations, and appreciate the efforts that are going in, which are considerable, I urge us to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Any other comments? Okay. All right, we'll move to our resolutions. Resolution 2021-64, authorize application for an acceptance of financial assistance for the Escarpment educational signage at Bluff, Headlands County Park. Dan?
Well, this is an application to receive some money to put the signage up on the Escarpment and some of the parks, or one of the parks in particular.
Any questions? Okay, since it's involved some funds, we will go to the voter board. I'm sorry, Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we all can generally agree that educational signage in parks is a good idea. I would just like to tap the brakes on this a little bit. I feel a little bad. I'm involved in parks in a couple different ways, but I'm not on the Facilities and Parks Committee and just only found out about this when it came on our agenda here. Just wanting everybody to look a little bit at the big picture. It is really great that groups are interested in participating with us and improving our parks. I think that's the absolute main point here. I just want us to think about a couple things, and this also has brought up a couple questions for me. And generally, like, what is the overall plan for signage in county parks? If it looks like this is for one park, for Door Bluff Headlands, do we have plans then, or are we open to then other signage in other parks, and are we open to other groups, bringing in signage? I guess I look at it, or I think about it in terms of, like, we have a planning and zoning department, a land use services department to oversee planning and zoning throughout the county, and I think we need to have the same kind of mentality for our parks. Consistency throughout our parks is important, sort of branding our county park, kind of having a county park brand, I think, is important. And I wonder how this effort ties into the educational signage throughout our park system. I'm aware of at least one other group that's working on signage and are hoping to be working with Wayne and Burke to do similar type things. And so I wonder how many, hoping, I guess, groups can work together. This is specifically for Door Bluff Headlands. It looks like Door Bluff Headlands is thus far undeveloped. I guess I'm wondering if there's any, what considerations are we thinking about for Door Bluff Headlands? This kind of potentially could change the, I guess, the kind of change the place a little bit. It also mentions that this is for signage along the road. That is sort of a long gravel road into Door Bluff. Does this mean they'll be adding new parking areas? It sounds like this could be a much larger infrastructure impact. And generally around the county, around the state, around the United States, we're seeing an increased interest in public efforts in public parks. And again, I think this is a good thing. I just want us to be, doing this thoughtfully and having consistency. From years ago, it kind of was usually just benches, and I know we have a policy for that, and our benches are all consistent. And again, I hope we can apply that same thing to signage. We see people supporting and giving money for benches, even for nature centers or parts of nature centers, and even as much as looking at private individuals and private monies being given, and grant money, kind of combining to build new towers. So everything from benches to towers, we've got considerations to make in how these parks are impacted. Signage not done well can be a hindrance to the public experience, and I hope that we are working with professional design standards for that consistency. There are people who actually go to college and they get their degree in educational interpretive signage. And I know that there's at least a couple of them that live in this county, so I hope that we're engaging those professionals to help us be consistent and help us do signage that's appropriate. So again, just some questions there, not necessarily looking for them to be answered right at this minute, but just some things that this has brought up. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We will go to the voter board. That is passed on a vote of, I can't see it, 20 yes, 1 nay. Thank you. Resolution 2021-65, acceptance of Wisconsin DOA WCMP grant for invasive species control and prevention. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-65 and accept the funds from the Wisconsin DOA in the amount of $23,055.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions? If not, I'm sorry. Alexis?
I was just wondering if this was going to a specific project or treatment area, or if it's just going to assist with the desist project in general.
That's a great question, Alexis. And so this is to support efforts by DSIST. It's general outreach and education. We're going to have boot brush stations installed, informational signs, educational pamphlets, and also supports one-on-one visits to landowners when they have questions about what's on their property.
Anybody else? Okay, we will go to the voter board. That is passed on a vote of 21 yes, 0 nay. Thank you. Resolution 2021-66, approval of gift grant and/or donation water quality notice of discharge, Zone Water Conservation Department. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-66.
So motion and a second. Questions? Dave Enigo?
One second, I'm trying to. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. And during public comment, this is the one that we had the applicants, the property owner speak, correct?
Correct.
Can somebody give us a brief history that seems to conflict with the resolution as written? Namely, they have agreed to cover and they have agreed to maintain and so forth. I'm trying to understand why he painted a different picture than what the resolution implies.
Sure, so I'll take that one. I think it's really important to understand the context that we're working within for this project. So we work with the performance standards and prohibitions that were established by the state. We've brought those into our ordinance locally, and we're the local implementers of that ordinance. And so really, there's a well laid out process by which we address those standards. One, we identify that there's an issue at a site, and there's no question about that here. The next is we seek funding to be able to make that offer of cost share to the landowner in those cases where there's an existing problem. So the idea is this: you can't go to somebody and say, you've been doing things this way for so long, now there's a new standard, we need you to change, without making that offer of cost share. And in this case, it's 70%. And so that's what we've done. We're working within the state parameters. We've applied to the DNR for this grant funding. It is, as the landowner acknowledged, it's a substantial amount of funding. We're solid in our numbers in terms of working through cost containment that's required by the state rules, identifying the issues that exist at the site, and the practices that are needed to resolve them. And so to get to your question, the resolution lays out the process that we work through. So first, we bring in the money from the state into the county. That's an agreement between us, the county, and the state that allows us to have this money that we can then turn around and sign a cost share agreement with the landowner to install those practices. So we're at the beginning stages of planning and designing those practices to make sure that they address the water quality needs. There's a groundwater, risk of groundwater contamination here. We want to be sure that we're protective of groundwater quality and work with the landowner to identify what's going to be workable with the site. We've maxed out what we can ask from the state, so it's not like we can go back and write a new grant application and ask for more money. This is it. This is the money that we need to be able to make that cost share offer, establish a compliance timeframe, and work our way through that process that's identified.
It's written, it implies that an agreement has already been made, and you stated that's not been made, which is one of the things that the applicant has noticed. I apologize for bringing this outside of LCC, but these are questions I obviously would have asked at LCC meeting had it been on the committee.
Sure. So what the resolution says in line 19, it says Soil and Water will enter into a contractual agreement with the landowner. So that's our, first we bring the money into the county and then we turn around and we enter into that agreement with the landowner. And that, as part of that, the landowner then needs to comply with the program conditions, pay the costs, install the best management practices, and so on. Once we make that offer of cost share, we've satisfied that requirement that's established by the state. It doesn't mean that the landowner has to take that money. There could be other ways that he could come into compliance on his own without accepting that money. But if we do sign that cost share agreement with him, then he needs to go through the process of following all of those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you heard him. He obviously was concerned about feeling like he's being directed towards something. And then the last question is the pond. Based on his statement, the pond was 1.6 million gallons, and the new pond would be 600,000, which is a substantial change. Usually, you don't undersize a pond up front or oversize a pond up front. Basically, I'm asking these questions so that he can feel comfortable. I think he's still in the audience. In hearing the responses from yourself and what the county board has heard from your department.
Sure. So related to the size of the manure storage, we are restricted by the state grant program in the duration of the storage we offer. So if you think about the size, we talk about months of storage. So you look at the waste that's generated by an operation, and you're going to store it for a certain amount of time until conditions are favorable for spreading. And so back in the 90s, it was a different grant program that we were operating under, and larger manure storage was built at that time. It doesn't mean that he can't build a larger manure storage now. He certainly could build one that complies with current standards at a larger size, but we can't cost share that any longer because of the program that we're working within.
So under those circumstances, it's a case of much like septic systems in the county, back in the 90s, certain ones were allowed, and today there's far more choices. The technology and calculations, in this case, number of months of storage required, has changed from when that original system was installed, and the new standards, in this case, happen to be smaller.
Correct.
Thank you.
So it's certainly an option to install a larger storage. We look to make sure that we maximize the amount of storage that we can. We know that we've got sensitive conditions up here, and so we try and get as much funding as we can to build the storage that's sized appropriately for up here.
Thank you.
David Engelbert?
Yes, I think Dave Venable asked most of the questions that I probably would have asked as well. But I think Mr. Vandertye alluded that he maybe wasn't as involved in the planning or design of the project. If that was, I mean, has he had sufficient input into that design that it sounds as though what's proposed is not the most acceptable to him? If the request for this grant money was delayed, is there an opportunity to explore different avenues?
Yeah, so two thoughts related to that. One is by accepting this grant, we can then start the process of more detailed design as to what exactly gets installed. So we prepare a list of best management practices and the associated costs based on what we have, the information that we have. if he chooses to change his operation and move to a new location or do some other changes to his site to modernize it and bring it up to what they want now, that's perfectly acceptable, but we're still limited by what's established as the eligible costs. And so we are more than willing to work with him to continue planning going forward. But as far as providing input into the grant application that we submit to the state, that's our responsibility at Soil and Water to do that work.
Okay, thank you.
Susan?
I just want to go back to kind of what you explained as your process, and maybe you'll expand on that a little bit too, especially for supervisors who are new to this idea. That we always hear from people in the community that, you know, we're not strong enough on dealing with contamination of water, and our Soil and Water ought to go in there and do something. And what people don't realize is that in the state of Wisconsin, there are very specific ways that the Soil and Water can work with nutrient management plans, but one of them is, and this is what you can expand on if I don't say it right, is you cannot require a farmer to change things that cost money unless you offer the cost sharing. And you, as you have explained, you have parameters, time parameters. So my understanding is if you don't accept this money now, you're not going to get it again at another time. And so the kind of ship will have sailed on the project in this particular place.
That's absolutely correct. This is our opportunity. There was no small amount of work that went into preparing this grant application, and it's a competitive process, and we were fortunate to be selected for this funding. And so it's a good thing that this funding has been awarded to Door County. It's exactly what we need to be doing to protect our groundwater. We need to find those sources of cost share and bring them in here into the county, and then enter into those agreements with the landowners. If we don't, we have no offer of cost share, and we have no ability to require anything different at the site, and the status quo will continue. So it's not that there's other opportunities for funding. This is our largest pot to source of funding to which we can apply for this type of work. And we've put together a comprehensive list of practices to address the resource needs at his existing site.
Todd?
Yeah, as part of a member of the LCC committee, David had asked both Davids asked very good questions. And I just want to assure everyone that from a committee perspective, there was some very spirited debate about this topic because there was just a general awkwardness of it. I'm speaking into the mic. I've been warned by Jill speaking to the mic. There's just a general awkwardness of the whole resolution because we ought to be proud about the work that our group had done to gain this substantial award of money to try and alleviate a problem or a perceived problem. And farmers who are near and dear to my heart and many, as an owner comes to the committee and asks us not to approve it. Just was very awkward from my perspective. And as we debated it, there was discussion, David Engelbert, about delaying this and could we give the Soil and Water Department some time to work with Mr. Vandertye to come to some resolution with the strong encouragement of eventually having this grant accepted. And there was spirited debate about the risk the farmer was willing to take in regard to it all going away and what that might potentially mean to his operation. So the vote was close. It was 4-3 in our committee, both to extend more time. I believe that was the vote, and then also to pass this. So all these questions had been asked, and again, for me, it was just the awkwardness of that amount of money and the department and obviously the farmer not to come to some mutual agreement prior to it coming to the committee. So that may shed a bit more light on where we were at from a committee perspective. So I think Erin and her group did a good job, and I think Dan certainly made his case probably a little bit better known at the committee because he was allotted a bit more time and a second opportunity to speak at that committee. Thank you.
Biz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, could you answer the question that if Mr. Vandertide decided to leave the site, go to higher ground, a different location for his operation, can this money be used at a different site?
Yes, within the restrictions of the grant. And so one of the things we recognize is that it doesn't always make sense to rebuild the exact same thing just to current standards in the same location. And that is something that our office has talked with him about. He is exploring different sites. And so to the extent that we have eligible costs, so if you think about this is taxpayer funds, and it's to protect groundwater and surface water quality. And so for manure storage, we can identify what the eligible costs for manure storage and apply them to a new site for manure storage. But we can't build, for example, a milking parlor because that's not related to the eligible costs. So within the restrictions of the grant program, absolutely, if it's better for he and his family for planning future to move to a different location, we are certainly willing to look at what those eligible costs are within this grant program and apply them at a new site.
Thank you.
Nissa?
There we go. Okay, so I'm not a farmer and I don't really have any friends that are farmers, so I just want to reiterate from what everyone said is that this is the max money the state is going to give us. Mr. Vandertide can make his own adjustments if he wants beyond what the grant says, so he can make it larger, same size that he has now, and that's not a problem. It doesn't mess with the grant, it doesn't do anything. And if we don't accept this money today, poof, it's gone. That it's just, he's kind of somewhat on his own. And that waiting on this anyway would be a bad idea because it's not like it's gonna get any better magically.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Vinny?
The mic here, sorry. I just want to say thank you to the Soil and Water Department and the Land Conservation Committee, which I'm also on for passing this through. This is based on statutes and what's required of soil and water conservation. This is how they protect groundwater quality, which is what Aaron said. And I just think that the discussion about working with someone or not working with them to make a arrangement or an adjustment is really limited to what the statutes and what the laws allow. And I think that Soil and Water has followed that really well from their reports and from what we can see as a committee. And that's why the committee voted to pass that offer of cost share is required to address water quality. So if it is not offered, then as Aaron said, the issue cannot be addressed. So thank you. Just wanted to reiterate.
Thank you. Kara?
Yes, thank you so much. I do feel moved by Mr. Vandertide's speech, and I am wanting to know very specifically if the money will go away in 1 month or if it will go away in 2 months, if there's like a very specific time if we move it back to committee. Thank you.
There isn't a very specific time. I think one needs to understand that we are not the only county that is asking for these funds. The state receives approximately 1 million to 1.5 million, depending on the year and where they are in their budget, of funding through this grant program to allocate to various counties. And so they are consistently receiving applications for this grant program. They've allocated this amount out of that source of funding to us. And if you delay, you are running the risk that they will receive a higher priority project and say, well, county, you have not entered into the grant agreement in a timely way, and we are going to move on to fund a different project. And so I can't answer yes, 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. That would be a highly unusual request. It is not one that in my former life, I worked as the local contact at DNR for this particular grant program. I had never seen anyone turn down the funds. Typically, it is are asked to delay or not enter into the grant agreement. Typically, it is viewed as a very positive thing to be selected for this competitive program. We did apply in 2019 for this project, and the state had already allocated all of their funds, and so they were not able to, excuse me, I'm getting my years here. We're 2021 now. So we applied in 2020 for this project. It was not selected for funding in 2020 because the state had already allocated all of their funds by the time we submitted our grant application. It was held over to this year and then selected for funding. So if you, the way that this program operates, it's on a rolling basis. There isn't like a once a year you apply for it. People are continuously submitting projects for this funding. And so you really do run the risk of losing this opportunity. I did see the current grant contact last week at a meeting, and she said that no, DNR would not entertain any further request to resubmit the grant application.
Joel?
Yeah, good morning, thank you. Just to reiterate a couple comments here, I guess, personally speaking, not understanding, the LCC's involvement in this and everything, but it does raise a red flag for me personally when the applicant of this or the landowner comes forward and says, I don't want $286,000. There obviously is heartburn and angst between the county and him as the landowner. So I don't know if any of the board members or the committee members can shed light on where the dissent is between everybody on it. And then Kara asked the question about whether or not it has to get used right away. And thirdly, has the county entered into the agreement with Mr. Vandertai yet? Well-known family down in Southern Door farming. I don't think they're here to do anything harm. And if he's asking for questions and comments on how to do things, I think it's in the best interest of the county to play fairly with the farmers. Not that that's not happening, but if everybody's not 100% on page, it doesn't seem like it's the right thing to do, at least in my gut. So if the county can still get the money, but in 30 days or 60 days, 90 days, if they're not going to take it back right away, I have to assume that there's going to be more conversation back and forth with Mr. Vandertai on how this process is going to go forward, because I truly don't know that I can support. If he's saying, I don't want this, there's a problem. And that's what we all need to look at, unless somebody can answer that question right now. What is that problem? And maybe Mr. Fisher, who's raising his hand, can answer that.
Well, answer Joe's question.
I raised my hand, then I looked to see where I hit the button, but. All right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I held off speaking because you were doing a great job of explaining it. More questions being asked than what needed to be asked. We need to get this done. We need to get it done now. If we hesitate, if we turn it down, we run the risk of losing the funds. That's it. If we lose the funds, that's also it as far as being able to help Mr. Vandertai in the future. That's done because it's tied to this operation. If I understand.
You lose a lot.
Yeah. And if he wanted it at first, I think what happened was he found out that if we turn it down, now the county's stuck. He can do whatever he wants and we have no recourse because we as a county turned down helping him. It's imperative that we take these funds. What this does is open up more possible funding for him later on. Okay, this isn't the end all of our financial assistance as we go through and put together a true plan to solve the issue or to address the issue. You gotta, it's imperative we take these funds. We're out. If we say no to this, he pretty much has a carte blanche opportunity to just do whatever he wants, because once it's turned down, it's over. And And that's it. This is important. This is important that we take this so that we can do some good for him, his operation, and the people of Door County. That's it.
Okay, we kind of got things out of order. So Vinny, you're next.
I'm sorry if I spoke.
No, you're fine.
No, the computer.
The computer.
Thank you. I think Ken mostly said what I wanted to say again, and if Aaron has comment on it too, I would like to hear, but the reason that someone would not want to take a grant for cost sharing is if they're not offered cost sharing, and I'm not saying this is his reason, I'm just saying in general, if you're not offered cost sharing, you don't have to address the groundwater pollution happening on your property. Because the only way you have to address it is if you're offered 70% cost sharing. I'm just saying that people keep asking why someone wouldn't want to do that. And I'm not saying that is the case in this situation or with this person, but that's how it works. And as Land Conservation Committee and Soil and Water Conservation Department, our charge is to protect groundwater and protect the environment. So thank you.
David Engelbert?
Yes, Aaron, could you, for the benefit, I think, of the supervisors, explain the notice of discharge process and how that kind of works? How
Okay.
this farm came to receive a notice of discharge?
Sure. So a notice of discharge is equivalent to the type of letter that we send through our county ordinance. And so it's a letter that DNR sends that identifies that there are standards that the state has for groundwater and surface water protection that are not being met. There are violations at a site that exist. And as a result, they identify these are the corrective actions that need to occur and whether or not cost share is required to be offered. That's the process that we work through within our ordinance. And so if you do not accept this grant, which I would strongly advise you to accept it, but if you choose not to, here's what you lose. You lose our ability to work through that process that the state has established. So as part of the notice of discharge grant and through our county ordinance, we identify that there's an issue. We identify what practices need to be installed to correct that issue. And then we offer 70% of the cost of those practices so that the landowner is able to come into compliance. By making that offer of cost share, we then are able to establish a timeline by which somebody can come into compliance. If we make no offer of cost share, we can ask, we can suggest, but we cannot require that somebody install practices to correct the identified problems at their site. There's no question here that there is risk to groundwater and that practices are needed. The state has identified such, we have identified such, NRCS and DACAP, 2 other agencies. So we've had 4 agencies involved in this. Everyone agrees that there's an issue that needs to be resolved. We know that we need to offer cost share to resolve that issue. Otherwise, if we don't, we essentially are turning and walking away from a known problem and saying, maybe we might hope that it might get fixed someday.
Could I follow up, Dave?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, the problem there, is it related to the leaking of the current manure storage that's been in there probably 25 years, I'd estimate?
Yes, there are 2 issues at the site, and this is certainly more detail than we would typically get into. There's also a channel that runs alongside of a heifer barn. Mr. Vandertye brought that up in his public comment, by which manure is able to enter into that channel and go to a sinkhole, a very large sinkhole that I'm sure most of you are familiar with.
Thank you for the answers.
Joel?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last comment because I was deciphering what was being talked about here now. So in a nutshell, it sounds like all parties are aware that there are problems there, including the owner.
Yep.
But you're telling me that if we don't accept this, the county, the state, the DNR, nobody has any authority to tell him he needs to fix his problems if they exist. This is the one straw that makes him yes or no on fixing a groundwater issue on his land. Nobody else can enforce it except Door County.
The way that the way the program is structured is that Counties are the local implementers of those state standards. And that's why we have our ordinance, and that's why we go through all of this effort. And we work with multiple landowners and certainly have through time. The way the rules are established is you cannot require somebody to change a practice unless you offer that 70% of cost share. I don't have within my budget another source of $286,000 to make that offer of cost share. We are continuously searching for sources of cost share to be able to offer people. And I don't want to make it sound like we're not willing to work with him. We absolutely are willing to, once we have that offer, once we have the money in-house, we're then able to make that offer of cost share, continue with the planning process, identify what practices are going to be acceptable to him, and meet the water quality needs.
Can I just follow up with that? So to reiterate, my question is, again, I'm going to say it bluntly, by the county accepting this money, it does make the county, I hate to use the word the bad guy, but we are the ones that are forcing the game of poker here that he has to do something. It's going to be non-debatable if this money's taken. I'd like to think that a landowner, regardless of it's a sanitary issue, a farm issue, whoever, takes personal responsibility and is going to fix their own problems. But you're saying that's not the case unless the county forces the hand.
I'm going to put a variation on what you're saying. I'm going to say that these practices are very costly, and we recognize that.
Yep.
And so for someone to be able to do it without offer of cost share can be very difficult. And so this is a good opportunity to tap into this source of funding. I just want to, make sure that we understand this is the funding that we have available. There is no more funding that we can go seeking for it. And so, yes, in some respects, it could put us in a position of appearing to be the bad guy, as you put it. However, I think we have to look at the broader community that we are representing, and it's not just one individual landowner who has an issue at his site. It's everyone who is concerned about protection of groundwater and the quality of the drinking water and surface waters in that area.
I understand all that.
Yeah.
Dave, Anago?
Thank you. First, I'm quite surprised at the amount of discussions going on here. I do want to reiterate that I don't want to step on top of LCC. Clearly, the vote pattern was very similar to what this county board is acting right now. Every human, every animal should have a concern about water quality in this county, in this state, in this country, on this planet. My comments were purely because the landowner had chosen to come to speak before us. That means something to me, to take that nervous difficulty of talking with this group of people. But that was not to say I was in opposition to helping him further improve the environment that he's living in and he's operating in. I know a lot of small farmers, both existing and retired from farming. I know a lot of larger farmers as well. We tend to look, act, and feel, this department tends to look, act, and feel like the bad guy because the nature of their charge, what they are expected to do on behalf of the state and on behalf of the citizens on this planet. That seems quite philosophical, but the reality is that there's clearly an issue. Not always enjoyable to find that you have to spend money to fix that you don't have, but clearly something needs to be done. I'm in favor of getting the grant. I want to make sure that that's understood and moving forward with those options. The farmer has still opportunities to discuss it. One of my concerns is it sounded like nothing was discussed with him. And I didn't believe that due to the nature of what I've heard about LCC in the past in general with all of its past members, but he made it implied that way. And it's difficult. You're asking to do something on a business owner's property that he's necessarily not going to have a full control, and he not necessarily should at this time. Thank you.
Susan?
Yeah, I'll try to be short. Many of you who have been on county board for a while and know Aaron's predecessor, Bill Schuster, have heard his talks on the fact that Wisconsin is a right to farm state. And the way that Wisconsin protects its agricultural community, at least one of the ways it does, is programs like this, which do say, if we rode in on a horse and said, you have to put in this thing and it's gonna cost you $150,000, would we be putting farmers out of business? We absolutely would. And so they protect it, or at least they attempt to protect and show that they understand the problems by doing this. But programs like this are the teeth that our soil and water has. And it's the same thing when we have septics. A while ago, my septic failed, I had to put in a new one. It's one of the many ways we protect our groundwater. So I hope we will vote to support this. Thanks.
Morgan?
Sure, thank you. Two things. First, I want to thank everyone for the lively discussion on this. This is not something that's in my wheelhouse, and so learning this process is really, really interesting. Second, Aaron, this is probably mostly for you, but are there other funding sources out there for the landowner to cover that 30%? Like beyond the 70%, not necessarily county grants, but outside grants, outside funding that he could apply for on his own to cover that remaining, so it's not solely out of pocket? Does that exist?
Yes,
Okay.
and he is in contact with NRCS, is the federal agency that has funding available. And so often our large projects will be jointly funded through both federal and state funds.
Perfect, thank you.
Dale?
My question that I had was just taken care of with the last two. So, thank you.
Is there anybody else? All right, we will go to the voter board. Has passed by a majority of 21 yea, 0 nay. Thank you. We're going to take about a 15-minute break till 10 till 11.
Remember, we never argued, we merely debated.
All set? Okay. Okay, we're all set to come back into session, please. Next resolution, acceptance of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Grant for Door County Pollinator Project. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion we adopt resolution number 2021-67. Acceptance of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Grant for the Pollinator Project.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? If not, we will go to the voter board. That is passed on a majority vote of 21 yes, 0 nay. Thank you. Adopt a tentative county supervisor district plan, section 59.10, sub 3 Wisconsin statutes. Susan.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt resolution 2021-68, which would adopt the tentative county supervisory district plan.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ken, would you like to?
Sure. Okay. So what I'd like to do is, on behalf of the committee, they asked me to kind of go through just a basic part of the process, because the committee felt it was very important that we're transparent in terms of how this came together, and then how we came together with the plan itself. So I'm going to kind of do that with you Just to kind of take you through the process, and that way you kind of understand. And let me just, again, go back to the premise of just the basic overview, because I think it's important to give you context. So again, our district size has changed to 1432, as far as the number of individuals that you try to represent for each district. Within that, we try to get within the deviation of 2%, which is a plus or minus 29 citizens within a district. Again, when you're looking at, I guess, the screen, what I'm going to kind of show you is you'll see along here, we define the number of districts. So we have obviously 21 districts. And then it tells you what your district right now, what the population is right now we have no districts, it's 0. So our deviation is 1432. It gives you your percent deviation. And then your other ideals. Is it a contiguous district? Is it compact? And it actually gives you your breakdown. So that's the process that you can kind of do to actually create a district. So again, other considerations obviously we talked about is you can look at existing supervisors or areas of representation. So the way the software works, just for transparency, I'm going to show you this one district, is what you're provided from the state is a map, and you can see all these little boxes. All those boxes are considered your census districts or census blocks, and within that shows you a population. Those are the number of individuals that have been reported through the census process that live within that, I guess that, polygon or within that district itself. So again, to build the maps, you kind of go through that process to make that occur. So let me just walk you through one, just to give you an idea, but then I'm also going to go through other areas. So for example, I'm going to build District 1 live for you. So I just know offhand that the town of Union's not the full extent of that. So I'm just going to grab all of the town of Union, and I'm going to say assign, which is this check mark. You can see that all turned brown, correct? If you look at here, it says that I assigned 1,000 people out of the town of Union, 1,005. I'm still short 427, so I have a deviation of 29% yet. So again, when we did this as the committee, we kind of said, okay, well, what do you do to do that? We looked at the previous area and we started to build in that direction. And then, so this, for example, I'm going to build it the way it was done in your maps. I'm just grabbing area, and you can see it turns brown as I do it. You can see here I created a little island by mistake. I have to make sure I grab that island, so I'm going to grab that. And I believe our maps also included this area. So that gets us close to what we had before, our previous district, but you can still see that we're short by about 15 or about 1%. So you can say, well, you're done. But I think in our maps, we actually came down and we grabbed this area of influence, I thought, in the map. So it kind of shows you how you could build a district. Okay? You can see I grabbed one wrong, so then I can unassign it if I do that. So that's how you go through and you can build a single district. So we're off by about 9 individuals, but we're at a deviation and we're looking pretty good. Our compactness is, the higher the number, and you see this for the compact, means it's a compact district. All right, so that's just a sample of how it was put together. But let me go through some areas that actually cause what we thought was interesting, makes it a little bit difficult to work with. And what it is actually the census data itself. So I'm going to walk you through 3 different areas to show you. And it affects your ability to make things compact and how you make districts. So I'm just going to make it brown, but it's not obviously part of the district. But what happens on some of these is, again, is how the U.S. Census actually builds the areas. So you're trying to make them compact, and let's say you wanted to grab just one part of, this is the village of Egg Harbor. Let's say you just wanted to grab one part, or just say you wanted to use, I think this is County Road E, as your dividing line. The problem is it looks good, but if I actually grab this polygon here, you can see that it actually grabs this whole area, but look how it wraps all the way around. That's how they created that polygon. So now it impacts how you create that district and how you might think it may look compact or not. There's nothing we can do to change that. That's the way the US Census Block does it, but that's what we're constricted to work with. Okay? So that's one example. I'll show you just a few others just to kind of tell you because it affects some of the design later. So I'm going to show you another one. So if I grab, I believe it's this one here, this 38th, you can see that. Looks like it's pretty nice and contiguous. I grab it. It wraps all the way through here. There's a little spot where they decided not, for whatever reason, not to divide it, and it goes all the way over to here. So by grabbing this area, it kind of almost forces you to grab the rest of this to have it go with it in terms of how the software works. Okay? I'll show you one other example yet. Ephraim's another one. So Ephraim, we have some of the same thing with that as well. If I pick this polygon here, you can see it starts way up at the top. In fact, you can't even see the top. Extends all the way up, comes all the way down, and wraps all the way around through the entire village. So again, it impacts on how you can make some of these areas compact or not. So I just wanted to show you that in terms of the impact of doing that. Okay? So that's just the basic, I just want to give you the basic training. So that's one of the things we talked about at the committee level in terms of how when you're looking at the maps and how some of that stuff was created or done. So let me just discuss now some of the areas that we decided were areas of issues. There's 3 areas of issues that I'd like to discuss. It's going to be, there's an area in Southern Door. There's obviously the city of Sturgeon Bay, and then there's what I would consider the northern part, Sister Bay / Egg Harbor. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to do the Southern Door area first and discuss that because the committee discussed that and they wanted me to show that. So I'm going to show you our existing plan. Oops, sorry. So it's got to take a second to refresh. So what you're looking at here on the screen now is, I guess, the existing plan, our tentative plan. But again, the one area that changed, obviously, for us, since we're kind of, you have to build, start somewhere in a corner. So we went through, we started the districts. Obviously, we built 1, 2, 3. Then we got to this area, the 4 and 5. If you look at our old maps, for whatever reason, they decided to not make it really compact. And they actually they took the northern part and then the central part and extended it a long way. And again, it's not as compact. And in this case, when the committee was discussing it, Naswapi didn't have really any type of representation the way that was designed before. So this is how we went through the process and we drew up and we made up District 4 and District 5 now. Okay. They both meet the requirements 4 and 5 in terms of the percentages. So they're 1.9 and 1.61% deviation. Our plan is still at 3.91% deviation. So this is actually a compliant plan, right? All right. So now going through the process, we had this discussion at the committee level. It's like, well, what if you wanted to preserve the seats? You can have that discussion. So I wanted to share that with you because we had that discussion, and I'll load it. So if you wanted to say, well, what would you have to do to actually preserve the 2 seats of our existing supervisors? You'd have to go back to a map similar to this, which is similar to what's, I guess, in existence right now. But now what you see what happens is you end up with these long linear districts. So the committee talked about that as an option. But if you'll see, in general, the plan is still 3.91% deviation. Our compactness numbers are down a little bit, but we're still within deviation. So this is a valid option for the county board to consider. It meets all the requirements, but it is a valid option. Okay? Again, when we discussed that at the committee went through the process and they recommended, obviously, our tentative plan of maintaining that it's more compact and a different representation. So that was a discussion that the committee had at that level. That was the one area of issue. The next one is actually the city itself. I want to talk this one through. back in 2010 or 11, when when the county board took up this process, it happened when we talked with the state, actually. It was very lucky that the city population actually matched mathematically with what the supervisory district population could be. So we had actually every existing city supervisory seat fell within the city of Sturgeon Bay. With the change in population, again, there's more population a little bit to the north. Each one of the city districts also got a little bit larger. So in essence, what's happened now is that you have one district that needs to spill outside the city at a minimum. You could have done more, but at a minimum, you need at least one that spills out, okay? So if you look at what was done before in a city and what we have now, for the most part, many of the districts cover the same area, except for District 6 now was the one that jumped out and now goes into this town of Sturgeon Bay. So the question is well, why District 6 or why that area? So I'm just going to zoom back a little bit. When we were building this map, we were going through the districts and building those maps. So you have obviously 1, 2, and 3. We just discussed 4 and 5. What happens is that this was a remnant, a leftover population south of the canal. So we could have done what we did in the previous one. We could have grabbed this population and wrapped around and gone to the north and gone further to the north, but it started making it really long in that sense. So since we knew we had to spill over or spill outside of the city boundaries and we had remnant here, we tried to see if that would work in terms of having the numbers work. And it so happened that it did work in essence, where we grabbed the rest of the population here, tied it to the district, and then the rest of them did fall within the city. So we discussed that at the committee level, and that's how that district was built.
Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, why'd you switch to 8 and 9? They're basically the same district, but you flip-flopped the numbers. I was in District 8, and now you make it 9, and the people who are in District 9 now are in District 8. Why'd you flop the numbers?
We were just numbering them sequentially, to be honest. There was no, it was a sequential.
Okay, well, I just wondered why, you know.
Again, it just changed because we're just going sequential on it because of how the districts are built. Right. Yep.
David?
Yeah, I just asked that Mr. Pavic explain who we are. The committee knows who was involved with it, but if you would explain who was involved with the discussions rather than just yourself.
Sorry. So the committee was composed of Susie was the chair. I forgot who the election of the vice chair was. Or did we do a vice?
Nancy.
Nancy was the vice chair. Elizabeth Gauger, Morgan Rusnick, and David Inigal.
Who the staff was involved in.
The staff involved was Zachary Schwartz. He's our new LIO. Jill Lau and myself were the staff involved working with the committee.
Thank you, because at the moment they're just all thinking as you.
No, sorry. There was actually a group. All the maps were worked with a group on it.
Biz?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, I have the same question that Mr. Austin had. I'm in District 15, and under this plan, I'm in District 14. And then what was used to be 14 is 13, and then 15 is way up at Egg Harbor. Why? I understand you're moving the lines with the population, but why are you changing these district numbers?
Again, the district numbers just changed because the overall supervisory districts changed, and as you go further north, the numbers didn't match up as well anyway. So we just decided to make it cleaner for the constituent to understand that we're keeping it sequential rather than having numbers placed all over the map.
I think that's going to be confusing to the voter, but because they're used to voting in a certain district, and then now the number has changed. So,
well, when they go vote, they're not even probably looking at your number. They're going to go vote where their polling place is. They generally don't even know the number.
They ask you what district you're from.
So.
Yeah, they do.
All right, so let me keep going.
Generally ask you what ward you're in, not district, what ward you're in.
I have one more question that Mr. Administrator, before you move on. We're told that the last number I heard was like 47% of the people that have a home here don't vote here. So their primary home, say, is in Illinois, and that's where they vote. How do you exclude those people? They're on the tax roll, that they're not voting here as well as at their home. So that, they're voting 2 times, which can really affect, especially at the federal level, when you're voting. How do they determine that people that own a summer home here are not actually voting here?
It's when you completed your census form, and wherever you declared your legal residence for your census form is where you're seeing those numbers in these boxes.
Because you're saying the population went way up, and it just, if people fill that form out, what prevents them from cheating to say that they were voting in 2 different places?
It's nothing to do with voting.
Yeah, that's a different topic for a different day, but we're relying on the data that's provided by the census and certified by the census, and ultimately was certified by the president and now sent down to the states, and then we have to work with the data that's before us.
All right.
I'm honest, I can't do anything with it.
I'm sorry, move on.
Okay, then the last area of, I guess we're discussing was, I guess what I consider northern door. So again, right now you're looking at was the tentative plan that was put before you. I guess there is 2 things I'd like to show you on this one. The areas that were probably causing the most contention was the village of Egg Harbor and also part of Sister Bay in terms of driving the maps. And also remember those funny shaped polygons I talked before in terms of trying to make them compact. There are some issues that we came up with. So again, this was the map that was recommended by the committee. I will show you another option that we did look at, just because the committee wanted me to show that. Oops, that's the same one. Sorry, can you get that? So at this one, we actually looked at 2 different options. One was trying to look at this northern portion here of combining Sister Bay with part of the village of Ephraim. Again, what you'll see here is it started to make the district a little bit, come on,